I have to tell you, it's very rare that I'm truly shocked and disturbed. I thought I'd seen a lot of things in my life in Ireland, but the harrowing story of abuse and neglect of a family in County Roscommon is beyond belief. Let me tell you some of the. I've studied this story today, and it's really quite appalling. 6 young children were obliged to endure maybe up to 10 years of what can only be described as depravity in their family home in County Roscommon. Their mother has admitted to forcing a 13-year-old son to have sex on at least 4 occasions. The children were in total squalor and dirt. There were dead rats and mice around the house. They were in cold conditions. They were only given maybe 2 meals a week. And always in these cases, the charges they admit to aren't the full extent of the horror. This is the first time in the state a woman has been convicted, a mother has been convicted of incest against one of her children, and she's due to be sentenced today. It seems that for a period of 10 years, that health workers, home helps, were visiting this. And, this didn't happen in some city centre suburb where there was a totally impersonal lifestyle. This would have a rural network of priests, schools, neighbours, Gardaí, GPs. And it seems that this horror went on. To fully analyse this case, I'd like to welcome to the programme a journalist and social worker who's really long-standing commentator in the area of child abuse, Phil McGullagh-Gwynn. Welcome to the programme, Phil.
Hi, Ivan. Thanks for having me on.
Now,
just to be very brief, it's Phil McGullagh-Gwynn. I'm no longer a social worker. I was a social worker for about 15 years and now an author and journalist.
Okay, well now, but in a good position to analyse this from, in a dispassionate way, if you can be dispassionate about
Indeed,
this.
so I was listening to your lead-in there, Ivan, and may I comment on that? You said you were shocked and disturbed. You are correct to be disturbed, and I share that with you. But I do not share your shock, because shock implies surprise. Now, I was on this show when Kevin Myers was deputising for Hookie, last year sometime, about the summer. We were commenting on children being left in police stations overnight because there was no place to take them into care. So the Child Protection Services, and I know you have on your desk an article of mine from McGill in 2002 when I wrote that the Child Protection Services were not fit for purpose. And I wrote that from a basis of, at that point, just recently having been a team leader in North Dublin. So I could see the system not working from the inside. Now, I tried my level best to try to get the system to work from the inside, and you realise that, one person can't move a bureaucracy.
Well, can I tell you that I was, back in the 90s for my sins, I was opposition health spokesperson, and I dealt with the childcare legislation, and my understanding was, and I went painstakingly through this, that where there was a question of doubt, there would be a supervision order, and then there would be a care order, and it was either foster care, in a home, or maybe with another relative, an auntie or a grandparent. What happened to those provisions?
Okay, well, we can't use certain words for legal reasons, but let's say you weren't told the truth. Okay?
But it's the law, that's my point. Is there sufficient law on the statute book?
There is and there isn't. Obviously, this lady, I believe, has been sentenced, right? And the judge in sentencing her saying that were it a father who'd committed these sexual crimes against the child, then the father could have got life imprisonment, and deservedly so, in my view. She can only get 7 years.
Are you saying the law is too protective of parents? In other words, are we assuming, and I want to bring on this ex parte judgment because Alan Shatter makes the point, the nature of an ex parte order is almost a temporary measure for the courts, and the health board or the HSE had an opportunity to go back to court and say, no, we don't agree with this. And in other words, it's not a reasonable alibi for a dysfunctional child protection service to blame the courts.
No, it isn't. No, I was speaking to your researcher today, and she says, look, try and give me the sense of what you would say and what happened. I said, these kids were caught in a perfect storm of incompetence by the health board and ideology. Right, you've got two ideologies working, but the main one for social workers is that if they find a single woman caring for kids, they collude with the woman. They think it's a shame you're bringing up kids on your own. We will help you. Now, there's nothing new about this, but what I have to say is that I was looking at the Baby P case. I know you have an article of mine in front of you that I wrote in December about the Baby P case. The important thing about the Baby P case, the wee boy who was killed in England, is that people lost their jobs. 3 very senior people in Haringey Council lost their jobs. That's the important thing. Who in the health board, in the HSE, on this case, which is appalling, will lose their jobs? Because the HSE have forum on this, particularly that particular area. There's a Kelly Fitzgerald case in the 90s, when you were perhaps opposition spokesman. The Kelly Fitzgerald case. She was taken from London with her parents. They stayed in Mayo for a while. She was beaten and abused. The health board knew about it. They were told by the authorities in London, and nothing was done. When the child died.
Well, sorry, what I'm trying to get at here is, and I'm with you on this, Phil, is that it seems as far back as 1996. That's 12 years ago, before this conviction today. And for those listeners who haven't heard, she got the maximum of 7 years imprisonment. But in 1996, there were home help and social workers visiting this home. I mean, surely they must have seen the visible evidence of abuse. Secondly, it seems the GP in this case reported to the health board his concerns. Put it like this, given the present or the legal provisions that prevailed at that time, what should have happened?
Well, under the 1991 Childcare Act, right? Now, she was sentenced today for the sexual crime under the 1908 legislation. But there's a 1991 Childcare Act. Those kids could have been taken into care that day, right? So it is disingenuous at best for the HSE to say, if only we had better legislation. The legislation's there. The 1991 Childcare Act is more or less a copy within our own constitutional parameters of the 1989 Childcare Act in England and Wales. And it's fine. It does its job. It's fit for purpose. What isn't fit for purpose is the organisation.
And tell me this, there's been a call for a commission of investigation into this. Do you think it's evident what happened, or do we need a further investigation?
Well, I looked at the Baby P case. There was a full and comprehensive report on the Minister's desk within a month or 2 months. Right, this can be done. We don't need a tribunal that takes 10 years, right? We know this stuff. We know this stuff. The problem is the HSE, the Child Protection Services, are not fit for purpose. The people in them want to run a service for their benefit on office hours, and they don't like going into nasty, grubby, violent houses. We have the wrong people in the wrong jobs doing the wrong things.
And if you were Barry Andrews, Minister for Children, what would you do?
Well, I wrote to Barry Andrews back in May when he got the job, when I saw him on prime time. And I congratulated him and gave him a very detailed letter, and I copied it to Alan Shatter. Right? I got a standard reply, we've received your letter, and 2 months later I got a reply saying, thank you very much for your letter, we've passed it on to the HSE. Now, I gave him a detailed, it was more like a submission than a letter, why the HSE wasn't fit for purpose, why the child protection system wasn't fit for purpose. So what does he do? He passes it on to the organisation that I have said isn't fit for purpose. He should resign as well.
Right. Can I ask you, do you pass any, like, this is beyond the pale in terms of criticism, do you have any criticism of a judge who made a judgment saying that the child must stay with the family in those circumstances? Like, is there any accountability of a judge who made a decision like that now that we know what we know?
It beggars, in that sense, it beggars belief. But
could the judge have ordered an investigation and say, look, I want the full facts before I give any judgment in this case?
Well, presumably any judge, Ivan, before they make any judgment, need to have all the facts. I mean, I was a social worker for many years providing reports to court in this jurisdiction and over in Britain, where the judge says, I don't have all the facts. I need a professional person to go out and gather the information and bring it back to this court in a written form. Now, I don't know if that happened in this case or not, but to come back to what you started with, you were shocked and disturbed. I'm not shocked. I'm on record years back that this will happen. I said when I wrote my piece about the Baby P case in December, I said, look, we shouldn't be smug about this. Children have died in this jurisdiction because social workers weren't fit for purpose, and they will die again. Now, thankfully, in this case, no child died, but to be honest, those kids have their lives destroyed in a way that, unless you've been through it, you cannot understand.
No, it is beyond
their
belief.
lives are destroyed.
Can I ask you, Phil, this happened in quite a rural backwater. I know Roscommon quite well, and I don't know what part of Roscommon this took place in, but it would be a rural area. Is it the case with a lot of our state services that there is a regional imbalance? Could this have happened in any part of Ireland?
Yes. I was a team leader for Northern Area Health Board. That's covering a big chunk of North Dublin, probably one of the more densely populated parts of the Republic. It could happen there.
So it's universal. It's not just a localised failing of the.
You don't get a bad HSE when you're suddenly out in green fields and you can see sheep, right? The HSE, Child Protection Service, is not fit for purpose.
Yeah, the other area I wanted to ask you about is the question of a constitutional referendum. There was, I think, all-party agreement that, and I'm not sure whether this was to do with parental rights or you can tell us what it was about. And then after the recent referendum failure and the whole difficulties over referendum commissions, I saw all the political sort of establishment, or particularly the government, slip-sliding away and say, well, look, we're going to avoid a referendum at all costs.
Yes.
In your opinion,
yes,
for people who are listening, who are in a state of shock and horror about this, is there a need for a constitutional... I understand your point about resources, staff, capacity, culpability, accountability, heads to roll. I understand. But is there a need for a constitutional referendum or not?
Well, currently, if a child is born to unmarried parents, then that child only has a constitutional relationship with the mother. So, let's say we had a case like this, and I have come across them many times as a social worker, where the children are with the mother. The father can be excluded from the lives of that, and a lot of guys walk away. They see the family court system, they walk away. Now, if that father had a constitutional link to the child, that might help. But it's a small part of it. I have to say it's a small part of it. The main thing is that the state services are not fit for purpose. They're not fit for purpose. Whether the child is being abused in a home with two married parents, two unmarried parents, one parent, relatives, aunties, grandparents, the child deserves the protection of the state. All children of this republic should be cherished equally, and we don't do that.
Phil, I want to thank you. You couldn't put it more explicit in terms of not fit for purpose. I hope policymakers and those in charge are listening.
I would like to have a meeting with Barry Andrews.